You're not going to believe what's happening right now in Hollywood. It's the kind of story that makes you stop scrolling, sit back, and think for a second. Because it's not just another celebrity headline. It's about one of the greatest actors who ever lived, Gene Hackman, and something that's left fans heartbroken and confused. They're selling Gene Hackman's personal awards and heirlooms, straight from his own home, the place where he spent his final years. Yeah, you heard that right. The same home where he lived quietly for decades is now the center of a story that's got Hollywood talking. If you've been following Gene Hackman over the years, you know he wasn't your typical movie star. He wasn't flashy, he didn't chase headlines, and after he retired, he completely disappeared from the spotlight. But now, his name is all over the news again. And this time, it's not for a movie comeback. It's for something much more emotional. When I first saw the headline, I honestly thought it was fake. I mean, Gene Hackman's awards for sale from his own home? That just didn't sound right. But the more I looked into it, the more I realized this story was real, and even more surprising than anyone expected. So in this video, we're going to talk about what's really going on. Why Gene Hackman's personal belongings are suddenly being sold, what his family is saying about it, and the hidden story behind his legacy that most fans don't know. Trust me, some of the details here might genuinely surprise you. Let's start from the beginning. Gene Hackman was one of those actors who didn't just play roles, he became them. You've seen him in The French Connection, Unforgiven, Superman, The Royal Tenenbaums, and so many more. He was intense, emotional, and completely believable in every film, and because of that, he became one of Hollywood's most respected stars. But even though Gene was a legend on screen, he was also one of the most private people off-screen. He didn't crave attention. He didn't live like a typical Hollywood celebrity. After decades of acting, he quietly stepped away from it all. He stopped making movies, stopped doing interviews, and basically disappeared into a quiet life. He spent his later years writing novels, painting, and enjoying the peace he'd earned. For years, fans would occasionally wonder what he was up to. And every once in a while, a photo would surface online. Gene Hackman, older now, smiling, just living a normal life somewhere in New Mexico. So when news broke that his home, the place he spent his last years, was now being used to sell his awards and heirlooms, people were shocked. Not angry, exactly, but confused. Because this wasn't just random stuff. These were items from one of the most iconic film careers of all time. His awards, his movie memorabilia, his personal belongings. Things that represented an entire lifetime of storytelling, art, and dedication. And suddenly, they were being sold off. Now, before jumping to conclusions, it's important to understand something. When a famous actor passes away, their belongings don't automatically stay with their family forever. Sometimes, the estate, meaning the people in charge of their legacy, decides to sell or auction off certain items. It could be for financial reasons, or sometimes just to preserve history. Maintaining someone's collection, especially someone as accomplished as Gene Hackman, isn't easy. We're talking about dozens of awards, handwritten notes, movie props, and rare memorabilia. It's not just about keeping them safe. It's about managing them properly. And sometimes, the best way to make sure those items don't get lost or damaged is to pass them into the hands of collectors who can preserve them. Still, it doesn't make it any easier to see. I mean, imagine knowing that Gene Hackman's Oscar, the one he won for The French Connection, could end up in some collector's private display room. It feels strange, doesn't it? Like a piece of film history being broken apart. For fans, this news hit hard. Social media was full of reactions, people posting photos of his best scenes, remembering his incredible performances and expressing sadness that such personal items were being sold. It wasn't just about the money, it was about what those items meant. And honestly, I get it. We all grew up watching Gene Hackman on screen, that tough, commanding presence, that voice, that energy. He wasn't just an actor, he was part of Hollywood's golden era. So when you hear that his lifetime of achievements is now scattered across auction catalogs, it hits a nerve. But here's something not everyone knows. This sale might not be what people think it is. There are reports that the estate plans to use some of the money from the sales to support film preservation and charity organizations. So, while it may seem sad on the surface, it could actually be helping protect the kind of art Gene Hackman devoted his life to. And that's something that would have made sense to him.
Because Gene wasn't about fame or glamour, he was about the craft. He once said he'd rather create something timeless than chase fame. And now, in a way, even through this auction, his work continues to have an impact. Another thing people forget, Gene Hackman's later life was incredibly peaceful. He wasn't struggling or forgotten. He chose to live a quiet, simple life, away from all the chaos of Hollywood. He was writing novels, doing art, and spending time in nature. He wasn't the kind of person who needed the spotlight to feel fulfilled. So, when we see these items, the awards, the scripts, the family heirlooms, being shared with the world, maybe it's a reminder of that same humility. Maybe this is just another way of saying, here's the legacy. Remember it. Keep it alive. Now, here's where things get even more interesting. There are rumors going around that a few of Gene Hackman's friends, some of them other legendary actors, are trying to buy back some of his possessions, not to resell them, but to make sure they stay either with his family or preserved in Hollywood's archives. If that's true, that's honestly beautiful. Imagine his friends coming together to protect his legacy, to make sure his Oscars, his scripts, and his personal notes don't just disappear into private collections. It's like they're saying, this isn't just stuff. This is history. It's such a powerful thought that even after he's gone, Gene Hackman's work continues to connect people. The idea that his legacy is worth protecting, not for profit, but for meaning. And you know what's even more touching? Even though Gene had one of the most respected careers in film, he never let it define his whole life. He walked away from Hollywood at the top of his game. He didn't need to keep performing to prove anything. He had already said everything he wanted to say through his movies. Think about that for a second. How many actors do you know who can just leave like that? No farewell tour, no final blockbuster, no big goodbye interview. He just quietly exited, like he'd completed his story, and in a way, that made him even more legendary. That's what makes this current story so emotional. Because for someone who lived so privately, the idea of his personal belongings being displayed and sold publicly feels like the opposite of who he was. But at the same time, maybe it's a way for people to remember him, to reconnect with the man behind those unforgettable performances. And let's be real, the timing of all this adds to the emotions. The world feels nostalgic right now. People are revisiting old movies, rediscovering the classics, and finding comfort in familiar faces like Gene Hackman. So hearing that his legacy is literally being auctioned off, it hits harder than usual. Now, here's a detail that not everyone caught. Many of these items aren't just trophies or photos. Some are deeply personal. Things like handwritten letters, annotated film scripts, and even small personal gifts he'd kept from directors and co-stars. Items that tell stories we've never heard. There's something powerful about that, right? The idea that you could hold in your hand a piece of paper Gene Hackman once wrote on. Maybe a note about a scene, a line of dialogue, or a message to a friend. It's like touching a moment in time. Collectors are already calling this one of the most emotionally charged Hollywood sales in years. Not just because of who Gene Hackman was, but because of what he represented. A reminder of the golden age of cinema. And as this story continues to unfold, people are asking the big questions. Should these items be sold at all? Or should they be donated to a museum or foundation? Should fans get a chance to own a piece of history, or should the legacy stay with the family? Honestly, there's no easy answer. On one hand, selling these items lets fans feel close to someone they admired for decades. On the other hand, it can feel like breaking apart a legacy that deserves to stay whole. What's interesting, though, is that this whole thing has made people revisit Gene Hackman's films. And that's a good thing. Old interviews, movie clips, fan tributes, they're everywhere. Again, people are remembering why they loved him in the first place, and maybe that's the silver lining here. Because, even though it's heartbreaking to see these items leave his home, it's also bringing his work back into the spotlight. It's reminding a whole new generation of what true acting looks like. Storytelling that's raw, honest, and unforgettable. When you think about it, Gene Hackman was the kind of actor who didn't need fancy effects or over-the-top scripts. He could just stand in front of the camera, say a line, and make you believe every word. He made you feel something. That's rare, and that's exactly why this story matters so much, because we're not just talking about some celebrity auction. We're talking about preserving a piece of emotional history. As all of this unfolds, insiders are saying that the auction is being handled carefully and respectfully. Some of the proceeds will go to film preservation efforts, helping restore old movies and keep them accessible for future generations. If that's true, it's exactly the kind of legacy Gene Hackman would have wanted. Quietly impactful, meaningful, focused on the art. And let's not forget, this isn't the first time something like this has happened. Other legendary actors have had their estates sold or shared in similar ways. Sometimes it's about keeping their memory alive. Sometimes it's about helping fans connect with their heroes. Either way, it's always emotional, but in Gene's case, there's something different, something deeper. Because he represented a kind of Hollywood that doesn't really exist anymore. One built on grit, authenticity, and storytelling. So this story isn't just about what's being sold, it's about what we're trying to hold on to. And honestly, that's what makes me respect him even more. Even in death, Gene Hackman reminds us of the value of humility, legacy, and the power of good storytelling. He never chased attention, and yet, years later, the world still can't stop talking about him. That says everything. So as we watch this unfold, the sales, the tributes, the conversations, maybe we can look at it this way. This isn't the end of his story. It's just another chapter, one that keeps reminding us why he mattered so much in the first place. And I have to say, I hope some of these items find their way into a museum or film archive one day. Not hidden away in private collections, but shared with everyone, so that young filmmakers, actors, and fans can see them and feel inspired. Because that's what Gene Hackman stood for: inspiration through honesty and hard work. So, what do you think? Do you believe fans should get a chance to own a piece of Gene Hackman's history? Or should his legacy stay together, protected for future generations? I'd really love to know your thoughts. Drop a comment and tell me how you feel about this whole situation. It's one of those stories that stirs up emotions for anyone who loves film, nostalgia, and the people who make it. Great! And if you enjoy these kinds of deep Hollywood stories, the ones that go beyond the headlines and explore what really happens behind the scenes, then you'll definitely want to check out the next video. It's about another Oscar-winning actor whose entire film archive was almost lost forever until an unlikely person stepped in and saved it. You're going to want to hear that one. So make sure to hit the like button, share this video with someone who loves classic movies, and subscribe for more stories like this one. It really helps the channel grow and lets us keep bringing you these hidden gems from Hollywood's past. Thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves, and remember, some legacies never fade, and Gene Hackman's is one of them.